Families of those murdered in the 2022 Buffalo Top Supermarket hate crime are suing social media companies, firearm manufacturers, and body armor makers for helping the teenage killer load the gun that left 10 people dead and injured 3 others. The lawsuit filed in the state Supreme Court in Buffalo lists Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Amazon, Instagram, Reddit, Google, the parent company of YouTube, Vintage Firearms, the Endicott, New York gun dealer where the racist mass shooting legally purchased semi-automatic rifle used in the rampage. Also, RMA Armament, the online company that sold the shooter's body armor as defendants. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of family members of Heyward Patterson, Aaron Salter, Margus Morrison Sr, Pearl Young, Geraldine Talley, Ruth Withfield, and Roberta Drury, who were killed in the shooting. Survivor Zaire Goodman, his mother, Zeneta Everhart, Christopher Braden, Brooklyn Hough, Kisha Douglas, Joanne Daniels, Robia Gary, and her unnamed child are also plaintiffs. Joining me now is Diandra Debrosse Zimmermann. She is one of the attorneys representing the families. Glad to have you here. So what basis by which you're suing the social media companies and the firearm manufacturers? What did they actually do?
Well, that's a great question, Roland, and thanks for having me, and thanks for covering this issue on behalf of the families. I think before we get to what they did and how we got here, we have to understand how they operate. And so while we are all, in these applications and on these devices and we think they're fun, their design, these are products, are made to trap people. And if you look at some of the work that's been out there, whether it's Dopamine Labs or other documentaries that talk about the manner in which these applications were designed, they are designed to trap you emotionally and to trap you mentally. And so if you love bunnies, you're going to see posts about 1,000 bunnies. And that algorithm is going to trap you in bunny land. And you're going to be buying bunny goods. And you're going to be thinking about bunnies. And if you are a white supremacist, which we are having quite the proliferation in this country and have had that for a long time, but it's growing exponentially, then you will be trapped in that realm of algorithms that drive you towards hatred of Black people, hatred of brown people. This is how you join a militia. This is how you target Black folks. When you take the additional layer of targeting youth, who we know don't have fully developed brains, who we know are susceptible to influence of all kinds, you begin to understand how extraordinarily dangerous these applications are. And this is not by happenstance. The very design of these applications are meant to trap our youth, to make sure they stay on their applications. And why is that? Because they're selling ads, because that's how they make money. And so it's not enough to make money and to ignore just the risk that exists. But in this situation, the risk that was purposefully created. We saw the proliferation through the applications during the election. We saw the proliferation of Trump supporters and directed hatred towards our communities. And this is no different. And so they may not have pulled the trigger last year in May, but they helped Gendron load that gun, and we plan to hold them 100% responsible and accountable for what happened to the 10 families who've suffered a lost one, the other families who've been affected by a tremendous impact to their community. And so while it seems complicated, it's quite simple. Same thing with the body armor manufacturers. Why are you selling body armor that's meant to be used in combat? We know why you're selling it, because you're targeting young, angry communities of white men who plan to unleash on us and need to protect their bodies when they open fire. And one of the heroes in this story is former Lieutenant Salter, who was a security guard, at the tops that day. He risked his life to protect others. And because Gendron was using that armor, he was able to survive that shot and continue to kill other people on the premises. So it's a tight causation line, and it's time that Meta, TikTok, all of these online providers be held accountable for the poison that they're unleashing in the Buffalo community and in our country.
Got 3 panelists here. 2 of them are lawyers, and so they have questions. Candace Kelly out of New Jersey. Candace, your question for our guest.
You know, I'm wondering because the Supreme Court did talk about this, and Clarence Thomas, he wrote the key opinion, and he said that really when you talk about algorithms and enticing people in order to kind of do terrorist attacks, which is what the case was about, that he said they're simply algorithms and that they really have nothing to do with anything except that they're piquing people's interest. So I'm wondering what your feelings are about that, and that the Supreme Court has spoken about that. That decision came in late May.
Absolutely. And I think what we're talking about is the Communication Decency Act and the immunity of 230, which was developed long before people understood the impact. We believe that case has no bearing on this in the sense of what we are discussing is a defective product. So our claim is not about the content, which has been the issue with the Supreme Court and the issue with a number of other courts. This is, and I'm primarily a product defect lawyer, this is a defective product, a product designed to create addiction. A lot of the facts of that case, very important facts, as you said, that has to do with terrorism, really focused on the content, right? Bringing people in, recruiting people to participate in terrorist activity. Other cases involving human trafficking, focusing on the substance of the communication, that the online provider was simply hosting information posted by others. And the courts found that that was protected by 230, Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. That's not what we're talking about here. We're saying this is a defective product by design, and that it is extraordinarily dangerous. The proof is in the pudding, but also even in the intent of the design. It was meant to keep people trapped. So similarly, I sit in leadership on the social media MDL national case where we are addressing some of these issues. We believe it is outside of the immunity protections of the Communication Decency Act. And we pray that this is the court that sees that and allows us to hold the folks who are responsible, because these are just not opinions or hosting people's opinions or the algorithms kind of in a vacuum. It is the application itself. The design is meant to do what is doing here and what led to the murder of 10 Americans in Buffalo in May of 2022.
Civil rights attorney out of Los Angeles, Joe Richardson. Joe?
Hey, how you doing? I love this theory, and I was going to ask you about, sometimes when you are bringing cases, on the consumer side, on the plaintiff side, product liability, you're trying to advance a theory that would be a step in a direction. I was going to ask what your previous steps were, and I think when you talked about it from a product liability standpoint, I got the vision, which is good. Well, let me ask you this. Is there any coordinated advocacy piece? I find sometimes, you really want to do for permanently, you're doing what you have to do now, but permanently what you want to do is hopefully plug up the hole. And there's a lot of battlegrounds and people that are already trying to get legislation passed to deal with so many of these issues. I'm wondering if there's any coordinated effort with people that may be already out there or something that you or your firm are trying to do to help plug up the holes from a legislation side for the future.
Sure. So I think multiple answers. We have our own, and we are in this case with Ben Crump, who we all know and love very much, and all of his efforts. And then we have our own data privacy and technology practice here, led by Amy Keller, where we have been steadily, and David Straight, going after these companies for accountability and building the foundation. As you said, there is no Brown versus Board of Ed without Plessy, right? There are no big cases that change without building a number of cases. So aside from our firm, other firms have been pushing this. This was kind of like an opiates when at first people were like, what the hell? Everybody takes pain pills, but everybody should. And this is where we are. Everybody's on their device, but everybody shouldn't. And your children shouldn't be on the device for 10 hours. And a lot of these applications really should not exist. And so that's been happening legally. Really tremendous progressive plaintiff lawyers across the country saying we must do something because this isn't going anywhere. We saw this in the election, and this is not just our clients murdered, but clients across the country, folks radicalized online. And yes, I think there are a lot of consumer groups. I think it's the Social Media Center for Justice. There are a lot of nonprofit entities getting out there and educating people. And I think there are a lot of legislative efforts. As we saw, there were congressional hearings for a lot of these companies. Some of it has to do with privacy and the way that we're housing information, but a lot of it has to do with the addictive nature. And we saw the Surgeon General come out with a warning. So I think it's like tobacco. It's like opioids. We are just beginning to understand the absolute danger of these products, and specifically as it relates to our communities and being targeted. This isn't just, me as a mom, I have banned my eldest. I threw her iPad in the garbage. But, it's more than being pissed at your kids, right? This is creating and breeding tons of Ku Klux Klan to come after us through media and to gun down people in the middle of the day when they're in a supermarket shopping for their families.
Dr. Larry Walker, assistant professor, University of Central Florida. Your question.
Yeah, thank you, Roland. It's fascinating to listen to your in terms of your approach in this lawsuit. And we know that there are a number of protections already in place when it comes to gun manufacturers. But you mentioned the company that makes the vests. And I'm wondering, in terms of your approach, how do you think that's effective, right? So they make the argument, we make these in general, because you mentioned the military and then obviously citizens purchasing them. The idea that certainly they say, we just make these in general because obviously war is a problem throughout the world and we have to protect law enforcement. So in terms of what you're describing, your theory, how do you think that you could reach a jury as it relates to they make the point that, hey, we're trying to protect law enforcement, et cetera?
And I think the question is, you're trying to protect law enforcement, but you sell it to a child. And you sell it to a child who has some predilection and some issues. And some are just negligence theories, and you could look at some of our claims online. And I don't think it's that simple. I think once we get into discovery and you look at who they're selling the armor to, this is not just to law enforcement. This is military. And so many of our community members stand on the line and protect our communities in the military. When you talk about the volume of sales, these are to young, white, angry, dangerous males who are being told that our communities are going to replace them. So I'm not God and I don't have a crystal ball, but I've been through a lot of discovery. And I have a great sense that when we look at the marketing, when we look at their presence online, when we look at who they're selling to, that is not just going to be law enforcement and military officials. And as you know, a lot of law enforcement military officials get their protection through their employment. Sometimes they have it personally, but I think the discovery is going to bear out the real story about that company's responsibility in this situation.
All right, Diandra Debrosse Zimmermann, Debrosse Zimmermann, I certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Keep us abreast of this suit. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
For decades, the tobacco industry has deliberately targeted Black communities and kids with marketing for menthol cigarettes. It's had a devastating impact on Black health. Tobacco use claims 45,000 Black lives every year. It's the #1 cause of preventable death. In the 1950s, less than 10% of Black smokers used menthol cigarettes. Today, it's 85%. Ban menthol cigarettes. Save lives.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.